As the seasons change, if you're going to carry on riding, you're going to have to think about making some changes not only to your technique but also to your setup of your bike, and that's where we're going to start today. As conditions worsen, you're going to have to be relying on your equipment that much more to help you out. So there's a few little tips and changes that you might want to make to your bike, a few checks you want to do before you ride. Summertime, springtime, might be nice to turn up, rock up at your favourite car park, spend half an hour faffing with your bike before you head off out. Come the winter, the best place for your prep is the salubrious surroundings of your workshop, which may not reflect McLaren's F1 Institute over in Woking like mine, but as long as you've got a warm space, warm dry space, a bit of room to move, it's a lot more fun doing it here than it is in a car park with numb fingers. One of the first things you might want to consider is your contact points with the bike, but also the bike with the ground. And we'll start with that. Your tyres. Winter tyre choice. There's many tyres around, some specific for mud conditions. Other people prefer to run the same tyres all year round, but you might want to change the way you set them up. If we look at a mud tyre, you'll find often a narrower gauge, bigger knobbles with bigger spaces. That's going to shed the mud better, cut through the top surface of soft stuff and find some terra firma underneath, maybe better, but there is a price to pay in terms of the amount of contact you've got with the ground. So if you're rocking between soft mud, slimy conditions and wet tree roots, there's going to be a bit of a trade-off there. Compare that to your summer tyre where you've got narrow tread patterns, lots of bobbles, a wider surface. You can see that this is going to perhaps gain more traction in terms of cutting through mud, but this is going to give you a bigger contact area. I tend to run the same tyres most of the year round, but sticking some fresh ones on come autumn, running them through the winter, and as they wear down they become more summer-like towards the warmer time of the year, means that I don't have to change my tyres too regularly. What I will look at though is the tyre pressure, which becomes ever more important. When it's freezing cold and the ground's rock hard, similar to concrete, you can afford to run a higher tyre pressure. When it's wet and slippery and claggy and muddy, a little bit of give in there, it's going to give you a bigger contact point and more grip when it comes to the climbs, more grip in corners, and ability to squash the tyre as I push weight through the bike when I'm cornering or when I need grip to expand that tyre and aid me in terms of traction. So contact point with the ground sorted, a good grip available, a bit of softness in the tyre to grip the trail when necessary. We need to start thinking about our own contact points with the bike. Now I've been running these grips for quite some time in the summer and they're pretty much worn smooth. When they're dry, there's still a lot of grip there. Once they get wet, they become rather slippery. So it's probably time to say goodbye to these old fellas and slap on some new ones, making sure that my contact point with my bars is true and I'm not going to slide off them at any stage. So a nice fresh grip with plenty of grip on it, tightened properly, bar plug in, it's going to give me a nice confident contact point with the bike. Obviously I'm going to be wearing some gloves while I'm out there for one reason or another, but a nice grip that is all in good order is going to help things along the way. Next contact point we want to consider is probably the most important contact point with your bike. Your primary point of contact with the bike is your pedals. I'm running flats for one reason or another. We've got a nice broad platform with some fairly lively spikes on there which we can lengthen and shorten as we wish, but I want a good contact point with the bike. When my foot's covered in wet sloppy mud, I want a really nice firm point of contact with that bike. So upgrading your pedals will change the way your bike feels dramatically, particularly when conditions are at their worst. Clearly no such thing as a winter saddle for the final contact point, which is really only a contact point on the way up, so we're not going to make any changes there. So during the wetter months of winter, more of the trail is going to end up on your bike, and if you leave it there for too long and ride it in, that's going to grate away and eat your bike, particularly around here where the hill is made of pretty much sand. A good clean after every ride, making sure around the bushings and around all the moving parts is well and truly free of grip, is going to give you a bit more longevity to your bike parts, and they're going to perform a little bit better when you're out on the trail. So as much as we hate the cleaning process, it becomes ever more important during those winter months. Winter conditions can also help eat through your brake pads a lot more quickly, so before you ride, perhaps a good idea to check the life of your brake pads, giving yourself a bit more than you might do left in the pad before you think about changing them. If you wait till they're metal on metal, you're going to ruin your disc and make it very much harder to replace the pads once they're worn. So allow a little bit more life in them for each ride than you perhaps would during the summer months. That may mean changing them before you ride or just carrying a pair with you. But don't forget, out in the wilds of the winter, changing things, dealing with small bolts and screws, fiddling around with brake pads isn't always the easiest. So maybe bin them a bit early and get some fresh ones in there. Once you've got the fresh ones in there, don't forget to bed them in. If you power brake a few times, get the brake pads nice and hot, seals them up, and they're going to last up to 3 times as long. Fresh pads, without being bedded in, just out riding, you're going to wear through them really quick. So again, save yourself some grief, save yourself some money, and bed them in properly. Although you might like sleek lines of your design of your bike, come winter, a few little changes, which may be aesthetically less pleasing, are actually going to keep you a lot more clean and dry, and hopefully keep a bit of the trail off you and deflect a bit of the dirt. You can go mud guards, but you're going to get wet and dirty. So perhaps a smaller, simpler fix, which is less aesthetically displeasing, is a small guard between the crown of your forks and the top of the sliders. I've fashioned one here out of an old inner tube, a few cable ties, but you can buy something specific for the job. In these times of austerity and thrift, making use of an old inner tube, a bit of recycling, doesn't hurt at all. And at the end of the day, I'm only going to really run it in the worst of the conditions and through the winter, so I can rip it off for summertime. Crud catchers, which sit under here, catch a lot of the flick off the wheel as well, can make a big difference to your comfort as you ride. But again, horses for courses, a bit down to you. You might like to completely cover the bike with guards, mud guards, etc., or just a couple of little key points to keep the mud flicking off the wheels and out of your face. As well as your brake pads getting more wear, obviously your drive chain is going to get more wear in the winter, with small particles of dirt and grit getting more embedded in everything. So again, a good idea to check your chain, check for chain stretch if you've got a tool. Generally, just feel how tight it all is. And again, it may be better to bin it early than have it break en route. Your cassette's going to get more worn more quickly, so look out for the teeth becoming ever so much more pointed, which isn't going to grip the chain so well and give you problems with the drive. So change them early, get a nice fresh one on, and it should see you through the winter. So that's the major piece of the equipment checked off in terms of your bike. But we've got to think about what we're set up with, and our personal attire, and our tools that we might be more likely to rely upon. Certainly chains break more frequently in the winter months, so definitely remembering to pack your chain breaker is a good idea. So that's going in the kit bag. It's in there anyway, but making sure you've got one's a good idea. Obviously during the winter months the hours are shorter. I rely on my lights a lot more when I'm riding. Do I take them off every time? Sometimes if I'm heading out mid-afternoon I'm going to keep my lights on. You never know. You might be coming back on a section of road, you might get stuck out with a bit of maintenance requirement, or just take longer than you thought to get back from the woods. And carrying a lightweight light, even if it's not your full bore light, just something to get you home is a good idea. Cheap little red light for the back, just making sure that when you are hitting any road that you can be seen by traffic. So what am I going to wear for my ride? Obviously I'm going to prep up for the conditions. It's not always soaking wet in winter, it can just be a case of being cold. So layering up with some nice breathable layers, maybe a spare layer in your backpack, certainly something warm to slip on after your ride that you can leave in your truck or your car, very good idea. Good quality waterproof, one that breathes and keeps the water out, essential. You may like to go for the full legging effect, very nice. But I like to cover them with a pair of waterproof shorts. So much water flies up off the back wheel that even the most protective of bib shorts etc. is going to get slightly drenched after a while. And keeping your chamois nice and dry is obviously going to aid comfort and make it a much more enjoyable ride. So with the right kit, it's easy to keep your body dry. The feet tend to take the brunt of a lot of the water that's been thrown up by the trail, deep puddles etc. If you're a flat sole rider, a flat pedal rider, you're going to be wearing a shoe that's probably less resilient than perhaps a winter boot from an SPD or a clip-in type of thing. These do shed water well, but ultimately some's going to go in. So match with my shoes that are pretty protective, some waterproof socks. Do be aware that anything that runs down your trouser legs, if you're tucked over the top, can easily end up running down the inside of the waterproof sock, which will then hold that water really nicely. It might have a slight effect like a wetsuit boot and warm up gently, but they get pretty cold pretty quick. So making sure that the tops are covered keeps your feet nice and dry. At the other extremities of a body, obviously the head, we're going to be wearing a helmet. You might like to consider something underneath that for the colder days. There's going to be a lot of stuff flying up off the trail, so a natty pair of clear glasses can keep the mud from the eye. If you don't want to spend the fortune, get down your local DIY store, some protective glasses will do the trick, but you can take things as far as you want there, and performance is obviously going to be tied in with the price you pay, unfortunately. Finally, your gloves. Obviously you want to keep those fingers nice and warm, and you want a good point of contact with your bike. So a winter glove, these are quite thin ones, they're not particularly warming, but they have got made of a substance that gets actually very grippy as it gets wet. Actually.